Okay, good afternoon, everybody. We're going to call this meeting of the Sacramento Transportation Authority and the Sacramento Abandoned Vehicle Service Authority to order at 1:32 p.m. on June 13, 2024. Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll to establish a quorum?
Good afternoon, Director Desmond.
Here.
Frost.
Here.
Hume.
Here.
Kennedy.
Here.
Maple.
Here.
Rodriguez.
Here.
Sandhu.
Here.
Singh Allen.
Here.
Spees.
Present.
Talamantes.
Here.
Guerra.
Here.
And you have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. If folks could please join me in rising for the Pledge of Allegiance. Face the flag, salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Very good. Thank you, everyone. Madam Clerk, could you please read the announcement?
Yes, and I'd just like to note for the record that Director Valenzuela is also here.
Daniels is right behind me.
There you go.
Thank you. This meeting of the Sacramento Transportation Authority is cablecast live on Metro Cable 14, the local government affairs channel on the Comcast and AT&T Uverse cable systems. This meeting is closed captioned and live streamed at metro14live.saccounty.gov. Today's meeting replays Sunday, June 16th at 2 p.m. on Channel 14. This meeting can also be viewed at youtube.com/MetroCable14. To make an in-person public comment, please complete a speaker request form and hand it to the clerk. The chairperson will call your name when it is your turn to make a comment. You may send written comments by email to boardclerk@saccounty.gov. Your comment will be routed to the board and filed in the record, and that concludes the clerk's statement.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Madam Clerk, we'll go ahead and move on to the first item on the agenda.
Item number 1 is your comments from the public regarding matters not on the agenda, and I believe you do have one speaker request.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We have item number 1, Mr. Councilmember David Kent from Isleton here. Mr. Kent, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I wanted to acknowledge Mayor Sandhu from Galt being seated today, and I encourage you to listen to every remark. Mr. Sandhu has no idea about my remarks, so you can feel free to disregard them if it doesn't work to his advantage. But nonetheless, it takes one member with a tie-breaking and impassioned recommendation to greatly improve the efficacy of a body. I also wanted to say that while I'm in fact-finding mode, I do have some questions I'm going to be pursuing as a board alternate from Isleton, having to do with our population formulas, our road mile formulas, our what I call jurisdictional cliff, where certain resources just happen to fall outside of a jurisdiction in the public trust designed to supplement and support those resources. And I've noticed that the state has become much more interdependent since the advent of some of these formulas, in that the agglomerations and the urban megalopolises of San Francisco and LA and San Diego need to understand that the large land masses with small population communities that provide the supply for those areas are not necessarily able in their economic contribution to provide all of the conveyances that are required to make that interdependence operate for all concerned, for the statewide benefit. And that's somewhat apropos to Mr. Hume's remarks that he made in the session last month. So with that, I'll conclude. And Mr. Sandhu, congratulations on being seated, and long overdue.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Kent. I do appreciate your engagement and the cooperation between Galt and Isleton. And I understand we're continuing our conversations here. With that, we got a full court today, everyone. Yes, we're going to scoot over a little bit. Okay, everybody's scooching over. Well, what does this say to Mr. Desmond over there? We're scooching over a little more to the left here today.
Right. Lone wolf.
Even Mr. Daniels. Okay, with that, Madam Clerk, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda.
Item number 2 is Executive Director's Report.
Mr. Busey.
Oh, wonderful. So good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, board members. I want to hit a couple of items on my Executive Director's Report. So on June 6th, the SACOG's Transportation Committee recommended approval of $7.4 million in awards under the Carbon Reduction Program. Applications for this new 6-county program are due in February 2024 to fund planning grants intended to position regional projects for competitive grant funds related to regional trails, zero-emission vehicles, sustainable mobility options. Of that 7.4 million, Sacramento County got 4.34 million in awards for projects. I'm going to list a couple of these off. So Citrus Heights got 1.2 million for Arcade Cripple Creek Trail. Elk Grove got a little over 500,000 for one of its Laguna Creek interregional trail system projects. City of Rancho Cordova actually got 2 awards, 1 million for community-based travel planning, bike parking, and wayfinding, 250,000 for EV charging needs assessment. Sacramento County separately got a little over 500,000 for a Northern Trail Extension project, and Southgate Recreation and Park District got 682,000 for Laguna Creek Parkway Trail. So that's just kind of, those are the awards that I identified that are attributable to Sacramento County. So we did, from a 6-county round perspective, we got a large, obviously over 50% of those funds, which is great. Some of you might remember STA submitted for something called a Ready Set Trails, a countywide strategy. That project was not funded. It was identified as number 3 on a contingency list. So potentially, if some of these other projects don't move forward, we could move forward with that, but it's somewhat unlikely. Another big item related to SACOG that I wanted to hit was there's been a lot of work on the regional funding round. So the regional funding round is a competitive round where about somewhere between 130 and 200 million in federal and state funds are awarded through this competitive process. And so over the past 14 months, a working group of the SACOG board and a working group of staff discussed potential changes to SACOG's regional funding round. And there's 2 key elements that I really want to point out that I think are going to be beneficial to Sacramento County. The first is about a third of the funding, which is called state funding, called STIP funding. About a third of that was pooled with other counties, and they are going away from that approach. And so all the STIP funds will remain within Sacramento County, and we'll just have to compete against ourselves, but they all stay within Sacramento County, which I actually think is a big benefit. And another big change that they are proposing to make is on the federal side, they want to create what's called a system preservation program, which will focus on maintenance, just maintenance. So just maintenance projects will be eligible for funding under this federal funding round, which I think is a great change. A couple other items. Sacramento Freeway Service Patrol, we had previously gotten authorization to do an interfund loan up to $500,000. I just want to report back to the board that we're only going to be doing a $150,000 loan, which should be paid back in about 2 or 3 months. And then SDA staff did participate in May as Bike Month. We became a sponsor of that. We went with the City of Sacramento on their ride, which is close to our offices, and it was a good event. And then finally, the last item is just an outlook of what's coming to the next upcoming board meeting. So it's at the end of the Executive Director's report. Open to any questions the board may have.
Good. Thank you very much, Mr. Busey. Director Hume.
Thank you, Chair. Not a question, but I just wanted to call out, since it was mentioned, the regional funding round with SACOG. Pursuant to the last meeting where I made almost a flippant comment about trying to scare up some funding for rural roads, the executive director reached out to me and said, would you really like to explore this program? And so then he reached out to SACOG and Valley Vision through their CROP, which is kind of the program. It's a joint effort to identify funding for rural communities to compete in the regional funding rounds. And really kind of comes out of the rural-urban connection strategy that was launched in SACOG almost 20 years ago, I think. But I just wanted to say I'm very appreciative of following through on what I almost threw out there as a toss-away comment that hopefully will bear some fruit. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much for looking at that crop funding, and I hope that you just planted a good seed for that fruit.
Most excellent.
For those dad jokes here. Okay. Any other questions from the board? Seeing none? Thank you, Mr. Busey. Appreciate that. We'll go, Madam Clerk, we'll move on to our next item on the agenda.
For the next item is your consent items 3 through 7. Actually, 3 through 8. I'm sorry, 3 through 8.
Through 8, okay.
And we do have a public comment on item number 8.
We have one public comment on item number 8. Let's go ahead and go with public comment, then I'll bring this back to the board. Mr. Dan Allison on item number 8.
Good evening, Board. Afternoon, sorry. My comment on number 8 has specifically to do with the local arterials portion of it, not with the other portion of number 8. There is a request to add Truxell Bridge to the local arterials, and I don't think that this is an appropriate time to do that. The Truxell Bridge is not permitted under the Sacramento Parkway Management Plan at this time. That may change, but I don't think it's appropriate to add something that is at the moment seen as being illegal to the list. There's plenty of time to add it later if that comes around and is approved by both the county and the state. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Allison. Seeing no other questions from the public, let me bring this back to the board.
Move approval.
It's been moved by Board Member Desmond, second by Board Member Talemantes. Any other questions? If not, Madam Clerk, actually, we'll just, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Measure passes. Thank you very much. Okay, Madam Clerk, we'll move on to the next item here.
Item number 9, this is a separate item, and this is the Sac Metro Freeway Service Patrol Zone 2 request for bids, result, and reject all bids.
Okay, Mr. Busey, I think we're on item number 9 here.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Chair and board members. I'm Jennifer Dahl, the Special Programs Manager, and I'll be providing a summary of item 9. On November 9th, 2023, the STA Board approved a list of pre-qualified tow contractors, and staff proceeded to issue requests for bids for expiring contracts. The new contracts included modifications aimed at reducing rates compared to previous contracts. These key modifications include shorter contract terms, which enhanced market responsiveness and alignment with current needs. Fuel cost adjustment, fair compensation for fuel price fluctuations, reducing financial risk for contractors. Cost of living adjustment, or a COLA, ensured compensation adjusted with inflation, allowing lower initial bids. Revised insurance requirements reduced overall business costs for contractors. Minimum wage adjustments covered mandated wage hikes, mitigating risk for contractors. And truck requirements allowed the use of existing fleets, reducing capital expenditures on brand new vehicles. On April 5th, 2024, the request for bid for Zone 2, which is I-80/Business 80, was issued with bids due on April 24th. Despite the contract modifications, STA received higher than anticipated bids. An addendum was issued on April 30th, drawing attention to these contract modifications, allowing bidders to revise their bids, resulting in a lower bid from one bidder. The staff recommend awarding the contract to the lowest bidder. On May 13th, a protest was received, contending that the rebid opportunity allowed bids to be lowered unfairly. After consultation with council, staff recommended rejecting all Zone 2 bids. The initial request for bid reserved the right of the STA to reject all bids and reissue subsequent requests. The subsequent Zone 2 requests for bids will align with the request for bids for Zones 1 and 7, where the modified contract terms were emphasized up front. Staff recommends that the board reject all bids for Zone 2, and staff will reissue a new request for bids consistent with the procedures utilized for Zones 1 and 7. And that is the review of the staff report.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. Let me bring this back to the board before, I see no public comment and submitted. And Madam Clerk, do we have any other public comment?
We do not.
Okay, let me bring this back to the board. Mr. Daniels.
Yeah, so I just want to be clear that we had, we put out a request for a bid. We got 2 bids based on everything that was put out there as to what you have to follow and do. We got 2 bids, and one of them was obviously higher, one of them was lower. And we said, oh, geez, maybe you don't understand. And then one company came back and said, oh, geez, maybe we didn't understand. And then low bid, after knowing what the low bid amount was, went under that bid. I find that very troubling, very, very troubling that we would come back and allow a rebid after we already put it out there, and we're clear. We didn't make a mistake. We were clear as to what you're bidding on. So I wouldn't support allowing that second lower bid to be able to win that bid process. But I will support this item based on the fact that they're all just too high anyway. And I think it's important for us to go back and try to do better with taxpayer dollars and bring that number down. But I would say that procedurally, I could have never supported this in the fashion of, geez, maybe you just didn't understand, and here's a second shot after learning what the low bid was.
Thank you, Mr. Daniels. I think the point that, a lesson learned here that got us a cheaper or more efficient rate for the taxpayers is a good one. I see Board Member Rodriguez punching up here. Board Member Rodriguez.
Just to get perspective, what do we currently pay for the service?
So it's really hard because the contracts that we currently have right now are over 5 years old. And so the highest rate is about 125, but that's an outlier. The more of the average is under 100, and that's for a flatbed, and under 80 or actually 75 for a service truck. So we were hoping to stay under 110 to be able to sustain longer term. And that is another reason why we did the short contracts. Normally they are a 3-year contract with 2 options to extend, but because of the inflation and the volatility, especially in the tow truck industry, we figured it would be better if we had shorter contracts so that they wouldn't get stuck in a lower, like they have now. They currently are really underpaid, and that's why we went that route.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I think to Mr. Daniels' point here, I think what we're getting out of this by rejecting all bids and coming back out is we're going to be able to hit our financial target on what we can afford on this. So with that, let me bring it back to the board for a motion. It's been moved by Board Member Valenzuela, moved by Board Member Valenzuela, seconded by Board Member Rodriguez. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Measure passes. Okay, Madam Clerk, we'll move on to our next item.
Item number 10 is to adopt Sacramento Transportation Authority final budget for fiscal year 24-25. This was continued from May 9th.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Okay, Dustin, Mr. Perrinton, I think it is. Just to remind the board here, well, this is our third time seeing the budget. We had some minor modifications last time, and this is just a primer again of the same budget we've seen, I think, for the last 3 times. Dustin.
Yes. No, thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, Vice Chair and members of the board. So I'm pleased to present on the adoption of the Sacramento Transportation Authority's final budget for the year that we're going into, fiscal year 24-25. And today, we're seeking approval to close the budget hearing that was started during the last meeting, May 9th, and formally adopt the budget and the resolution for the upcoming budget year. So the STA has proactively been presenting budgetary information over the last couple of months, as the Chair mentioned. Revenue projections that are used in this budget were presented on January 11th, and the administrative priorities that are incorporated into the budget were also presented on March 14th, and those are encompassed in this budget. The draft budget was initially presented during the May board meeting, and at that time there was only one outstanding item known at that time, the appropriations limit, and that has since been updated, and it is on PDF page 42 found on our website. Additionally, there were a couple of minor changes, minor text changes from our independent taxpayer oversight committee's review, and that process happened after the last board meeting that we had. So the total applicable appropriations for the budget are $205.7 million, which is well below our approved appropriations limit of $365.5 million. And this budget provides us a balanced financial plan for the next year, ensuring that fund balances and expected revenues meet or exceed our planned appropriations for the authority. The proposed budget is consistent with the appropriations limits, appropriation levels of previous years. This year, there's a modest increase of about $1.9 million from $203.8 million in the prior budget year to $205.7 million in this current budget year. And as you know, we continuously monitor this budget process and the revenues and expenditures in it, and we will be reporting back to the board as things happen. If anything is outside of the budgetary plan, we're obviously going to bring it back for review. Copies of this budget are available at the Sacramento Transportation Authority offices and on our website. So to close this action, we are requesting that we close the hearing and approve the fiscal year 2024-25 budget and adopt the budget resolution for fiscal year 2024-25. Thank you for your attention on this, and we are now open to any questions about the budget.
Thank you, Dustin. Appreciate that, and I enjoy the Maze Bike Month photo in the Executive Director's report, too. Appreciate that. Any questions from the board here? We have no members of the public submitted. Madam Clerk, any members from the public? Seeing none, let me bring this back to the board. Is there questions or an action from the board?
I'll go ahead and move item 10.
It's been moved by Board Member Rodriguez, seconded by Board Member Maple. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Okay, measure passes. Okay, Madam Clerk, next item.
Item number 11 is to receive presentation from the State of California Legislative Analyst's Office on the assessing California's climate policies, implications for state transportation funding and programs.
Okay, here we go. Dustin, I think you're going to introduce our presenters.
Yes, so thank you again, Board. It is my pleasure to welcome you to this important session that we're all here to receive a presentation from the State of California Legislative Analyst's Office on a critical topic of assessing California's climate policies, implications for state transportation funding and programs. So the LAO published a comprehensive report on December 13th, 2023, which addresses statewide policies aimed at reducing greenhouse gas emissions in the state from transportation specifically. So this report delves into the potential long-term financial impacts of these policies and how they may impact our state transportation funding sources. Today, we have coordinated with the LAO to have a representative provide an in-depth discussion on this report. And the presentation will highlight the key findings, and it will also offer insights on how these policies may affect us on a local level, because all of these state level actions do eventually come into our funding for the local jurisdictions. So it's an opportunity for us to gain a comprehensive understanding and engage in a meaningful dialogue on the future of the transportation funding and planning. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speaker, Frank Jimenez, from the Legislative Analyst's Office.
Good afternoon, Mr. Jimenez. I also want to remind we do have two other presentations and one action item that we actually need to do on item 13. Mr. Jimenez.
Good afternoon, everyone. Frank Jimenez with the Legislative Analyst's Office. We've been asked today to present on a report that our office recently released titled Assessing California's Climate Policies, Implications for State Transportation Funding and Programs. I know a very long title, but essentially in this report, we're looking at how achieving the state's climate goals could impact state transportation funding and programs. But before I get into our report, I'll tell you all a little bit about the Legislative Analyst's Office. So the LAO is a nonpartisan office that provides analyses and advice to the legislature since 1941. We work for both houses and for both parties. Our major works include analyzing the governor's budget proposals, forecasting state revenues and expenditures. We'll report on topics of statewide and legislative interest, and we'll estimate the fiscal effects of proposed initiatives and ballot propositions. So getting a bit into the background of our report. So here's a chart that shows an overview of state transportation funding. And when I talk about state transportation funding, I'm talking about fuel taxes and vehicle fees that are levied by the state, that go to the state and remain at the state, are distributed to locals. So I'm not talking about the local side of the revenue generation that stays at the local level, or the federal funding that comes to the federal government and sometimes stays with the state or is redistributed back out to locals. So we're looking at the state's transportation funding, and this is largely going to come from taxes levied on gasoline and diesel and a couple vehicle fees. All fees and taxes except for weight fees and the diesel sales tax, which is just a percentage sales tax, are adjusted each year for inflation. I'll also note that the state also appropriates a portion of its cap and trade revenues annually to transportation programs. That's going to be that far box to the left. But essentially, most of the state's transportation funding comes from the gasoline excise tax, which is estimated to raise $7.8 billion in the current year. So that's that big box on the top. So that's about 50% of the state's transportation revenues. I will also note that in 2017, the state instituted a charge on zero-emission vehicles called the Road Improvement Fee. It's the tiny box at the top. Doesn't generate a lot of revenues now, but as more zero-emission vehicles enter the state's fleet, that's expected to grow over time. Most of the state's transportation funding is allocated to transportation accounts and programs through statutory formulas. Most of the state's transportation funding goes to Caltrans to support highway maintenance and rehabilitation projects, and another significant portion goes to cities and counties to support local streets and roads. So those are the two big boxes on the bottom. The rest of the funding goes to various formula and competitive programs that support transit and rail or will support multimodal activities. A portion of state transportation revenues also goes to paying previous debt service on past transportation bonds, and some goes to supporting the California high-speed rail. If you look at the figure on the left, that shows an overview of the state's 3 successive GHG reduction goals. So the state met its 2020 goal early, but it will have to reduce revenues at a much more expedient rate to achieve the 2030 and 2045 goals. The California Air Resources Board, or CARB, is tasked with completing a scoping plan once every 5 years that shows a pathway and the changes needed to achieve the state's climate goals. And these changes are called across various sectors. In the 2022 scoping plan, the most recent one, it called for various changes within the transportation sector in order to meet our climate goals. And transportation in California represents around 40% of statewide emissions. So transportation will be a key component in meeting our overall state climate goals. So getting into some of the technical aspects, I'll go over it very quickly of our report. So our report looks at the scoping plan and models revenues and impacts to programs off of 2 scenarios, and it's largely from the scoping plan. There's the scoping plan scenario, which essentially calls for the state transitioning all new vehicle sales to zero-emission vehicles over the next decade, limiting vehicle miles traveled for light-duty vehicles. And then we also have a reference scenario, which essentially just looks at policies and trends that were continuing at the time that the scoping plan was adopted, and assuming they continue over the long run. So it creates this counterfactual to the scoping plan scenario. So getting into our projections, so in our report, we take our 2 scenarios and project transportation revenues from state fuel taxes and vehicle fees, so we're not looking at cap and trade revenues in this report. But as you can see in our analysis, revenues decline in inflation-adjusted dollars from 23-24 to 2034-35 under both scenarios, with revenues falling more sharply under the scoping plan scenario. And that's largely due to this scenario, assuming that more ZEVs are entering the fleet. But at the same time, under both scenarios, fuel efficiency within conventional vehicles is also increasing. So both those factors create downward trends under both scenarios. I will point out that even if you make the claim that the scoping plan scenario is very optimistic on what the state would look like in terms of zero-emission vehicles, the reference scenario, which just assumes that in 2022 and ongoing those trends continue, we still see declines in transportation revenues. Sorry about that. So as I mentioned before, the state has a fee that's levied on zero-emission vehicles annually that supports transportation programs. But as you saw on the previous slide, revenues still decline. And there's a reason why that fee does not fully offset the revenue declines that we're projecting. That's because the fee only makes up a portion of the lost revenues. The fee's at about $110 right now, and your average gasoline vehicle pays around $280 in gasoline fuel taxes in a year. So there's this delta. So over time, as more of these vehicles switch to ZEVs, that's funding we're not replacing. Also, plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, those that run on gasoline and electricity, don't pay the fee. That's how it's currently written in statute. And also, the fee doesn't address anything related to gaining fuel efficiency in conventional vehicles. Sorry about that. So taking the revenue projections and also statutory formulas, we estimate impact to various programs. These 6 programs are the ones that we anticipate to have the largest impacts. In some cases, programs receive funding from a statutory set-aside, such as active transportation. So that program's always going to receive the same amount of funding. So that's why that's not up there and various other programs up there, because they receive statutory set-asides. So the largest impacts are to Caltrans highway maintenance and rehabilitation programs and funding that the state provides to cities and counties for local streets and roads and a couple other programs as well. So when getting to you all about what are the impacts, thank you so much, to local governments, we're seeing that state programs that support local activities, those that are supported by the gasoline excise tax are expected to have the biggest impacts. So we're looking at local streets and roads, which is provided to cities and counties to maintain local infrastructure. The State Transportation Improvement Program, which provides funding to cities and counties for capacity improvement. And then we're going to see smaller impacts to programs supported by the diesel excise tax and diesel sales tax. So that's the State Transit Assistance Program, which is the largest program in the state that provides funding to transit agencies, and Trade Corridor Enhancement Program, which provides competitive funding to support freight corridor improvement. So these are the 4 main programs that are going to, under our projections, be impacted over the long term that directly support local activities. In our report, we weigh various options that the legislature has in addressing this issue over the long run. In the report, we go in a bit more extensively on, things the legislature think about in all of these options, but I'll go over them at a very, very high level and answer any questions you all may like. The first is the state can look at increasing existing fuel taxes and vehicle fees. It could also shift transportation costs to other fund sources, such as the general fund, or pass another, with voter approval, transportation bond. It could reduce or reprioritize transportation spending, or it can generate new revenues from new transportation-related charges, such as a road user charge or a vehicle mileage fee. In our report, we have 2 ultimate recommendations for the legislature, and that's first to continue monitoring this issue, continue to monitor state revenues and programs. Even though we're projecting that these declines will occur over the next several decades, the exact timing there's some uncertainty given a lot of this depends on incentives from the federal government and the state government, consumer preferences, prices of vehicles. While there's some uncertainty to this, it's important to continue to monitor and see when this long-term downward trend is actually going to hit the state. But we do think that the legislature should begin to developing a long-term plan for solving this issue over the long run. This could include forming a legislative task force, tasking a department to look into this issue further, start to think about what are things we need a plan for today, maybe pilot programs that can be done in the next several years to help us put in a better position to address this issue over the long run. But our report's on our website, and happy to take any questions from you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jimenez, and we appreciate the LAO's consistent, independent look on the issues that face our state. I guess the long and short of this is that we have more work to do with less money. So, Mr. Busey, and then I've got Mr. Humes. But let me see if I can. Mr. Busey, would you like to go first? If not, I'll go to Board Member Hume here. Board Member Hume.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I just have a quick question. I thought I heard you touch on it, but I didn't hear exactly what you said. For the excise taxes, the sales tax, and the road improvement fees, are any of those returned to source?
No, so they will all go to the state first. So the gasoline excise tax, diesel excise tax, road improvement fee, transportation improvement fee, those will be put into state accounts and then redistributed, depending on the program, to local. So local streets and roads is one of the largest ones, and that's going to be dependent on formulas such as population, registered vehicles, and the amount of roadways in a certain jurisdiction. So it's not going to the source and where it's generated, but formulas will determine how that gets redistributed back out.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hume. Mr. Busey.
Yeah, I was going to try to put this into context. So I think what we're hearing is that the local streets and roads funding, which is the funding that each of your agencies gets for primarily maintenance of your streets and roads, that will continue to decrease. That's one of the categories of funding that are a significant decrease. And the other one they said was significant was the STIP funding. The STIP funding is what I talked about earlier, where SACOG gets that funding and then they distribute that out, right? And so that intra-county competitive funding round that they're creating, which allows us to compete for those funds, over time that pot of money will get smaller and smaller if there's not a change. And we just thought this was a good item to kind of give a high-level overview of where things are going. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Busey. Thank you, Mr. Jimenez. Appreciate the presentation.
Thank you all for having me.
Madam Clerk, we'll move on to our next item.
Item number 12 is to receive a presentation on the 2023 regional pavement analysis and provide direction as appropriate.
Okay, Mr. Busey, you're back on the road here.
This is, all right.
He doesn't know what to do.
Wonderful. Item 12. A little bit about why we did this report. Measure A has a requirement that we do a biennial pavement and maintenance report. Then that report is then reviewed by the ITOC, so this report satisfies that. Separately, most of the, I would say almost all the cities and counties do the same report every 2 to 3 years at a very local agency level. So this is more to provide a regional perspective. And similarly, there is a statewide version of this report that's also done. Some of the goals of this report was satisfy reporting requirements under Measure A, document current pavement conditions, policies, and practice across the various agencies involved, quantify regional pavement maintenance needs, as well as inform future funding and policy decisions on this. And this is from a picture from Mr. Desmond's neighborhood. So, sorry,
ouch.
had to give him a hard time here. Benefits of state of good repair.
It's Carmichael.
So, allows efficient and reliable delivery of goods, ensures roads are safe for drivers, bicyclists, and transit riders, represent government investments in local neighborhoods. So, when we actually get in these neighborhoods and you're doing work, this is one of the largest investments the neighborhoods see, right? It increases modal choice through complete streets. Some of the times those are required as part of the project, but that provides kind of why we want to do it. So, there are some recommendations coming out of this report. They come in 3 categories. First is we want to find cost savings with our existing programs. Second is updating our best management practices. And once we've done all of that, then we can really consider what are options to increase funding. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to NCE, who did the report. Margot is going to come up here and do a presentation of kind of the more analytical work that was done. Margot?
Thanks, Kevin. Good afternoon. So Kevin's laid out the context of this report pretty nicely, and I've got a lot of colorful graphs and charts and hopefully tell you a compelling story. Make sure I get this right. All right. So the first thing, I guess, is just to make sure everyone understands, what is a pavement management system. And it's a computer software program. It's got lots of different definitions. But ultimately, what I want to think of it is that it's a tool to help the staff and help policy makers answer some of these questions. And these are the 4 main ones. We need to know how many miles of roads that we own and maintain. We need to know, are they in good, fair, or poor condition? And then we want to know, how much does it cost to fix it? When should we fix it? And really, at the end of it, do we have enough money to fix it? So what we try to do in this report is to try and answer all of those questions. So if you look at this chart here, every city and county is represented, and you can see the center line miles. Obviously, the city of Sacramento and the county are the 2 largest entities. But the one takeaway I want you to look at is really, what is the value of this asset? This is a publicly owned asset, and it's a huge number. It's $8.3 billion that we have invested over the years in our transportation system. And this is just really the pavement portion of it. And so when we have this asset value, we want to think about, well, how are we going to manage it wisely and prioritize it appropriately? So the first thing we do as good engineers is we put together a scale that goes from 0 to 100, and some of you have probably are familiar with this. I've been to some of your council meetings and made a similar presentation. 100, of course, is being excellent, in good shape, and 0 is failed. And where we have collectively in aggregate, all the cities and the county included, is we're at a condition index right now of 53. And this is where people normally ask me, is that a good number to be at? And I can tell you this, I don't know. What I can tell you is that the decision about whether it's good or not is really up to you because you're the policymakers here and what you want to accept as the condition for your individual networks. What I can tell you, however, are the financial implications of what 53 means. So if we look at this chart, here's a breakdown of every individual city in the county, and you can see Elk Grove has the enviable position of being the best condition, a PCI, average PCI of 77. Unfortunately, the county is on the other side of the coin. It's at 41, and the average, which is that dark dashed line that you see, is 53. So we clearly in the county have a wide range of conditions that we can see, and I'm pretty sure you all know this from driving all the roads within the respective jurisdictions. If we take this average number and we tease it a little bit further, let's look at this chart on the left. So again, remember, the green is the good roads and the red are the bad roads. If you look at Elk Grove at the very top, well, 3/4 of the roads are in good shape, and they don't have any failed streets. You go all the way down to the bottom with the county, about 1/3 of the county's roads are actually in very poor failed condition, and about another 1/3 in good condition, and everyone else kind of falls in between. So what does this mean? This is good for or not for us? Well, the solutions to each one of these agencies are going to be a little bit different. What we looked at regionally is try to come up with an average for the whole county. So before we dive into some of the results, I wanted to share with you at least some photographs so you kind of calibrate yourself to what those numbers, the PCI means. Here's a almost new road in a PCI of 90. It's in pretty good shape. There's no cracks. It's smooth, no potholes, nothing like what Kevin just showed you in that picture. If we don't do anything, and we let the roads continue to deteriorate over time, in probably 5, 6, 7 years or so, it's going to start looking like this. Some minor cracking, nothing terrible. It's still smooth. You know, the bicyclists can and the cars can still ride reasonably smoothly on it. And if we continue not to do anything, the cracks become a little bit wider. We get to see what we call a pattern of cracking. In this case, there's some alligator cracking beginning to form. You can see there's some patches that have occurred already, but still, generally speaking, not too bad. This is 60. So this is kind of sort of close to the average of the county. Continue not to do anything, and now you can begin to see some real deterioration. There's some rutting in here. There's some alligator cracking. And for me as a pavement engineer, what that means is that the structure is beginning to fail. It's not just a surface issue. Those cracks actually extend all the way down to the bottom of the road section. And what that also means is that the repairs are going to be significantly more expensive. And I think this is the last picture. You know, hopefully you don't have too many of these in your agency, but you know, you're beginning to lose. You're beginning to lose aggregates. Potholes are forming. You have one bad winter, and the majority of this road is going to start falling apart. And at this point, you need to reconstruct the road. There's no any ifs or buts about it. So you take all those pictures together, and now we put it on, you know, my favorite thing, another chart. And what I want you to take away from this chart is, again, at the top where it's green, to maintain a road in good condition is relatively low cost. It's about $7.50 a square yard on average. And if we don't do anything, we let it drop into the red category, the failed category, it's going to cost over $100 a square yard. That's more than 15 times. So the takeaway I want you all to do to have here is that from a cost point of view, it's a lot more beneficial to fix roads, to maintain roads in good condition and to keep it in good condition rather than not do anything and wait till it falls apart. And the analogy I would share with you here is a car. You buy a brand new car and you have two choices once you drive it off the lot. You can come back every 5,000 miles or 3,000 miles and get an oil change and maintain it, and it'll probably last you forever. I have a Toyota, and it's got 200,000 miles on it, and hopefully it'll go another 100,000 miles. The other choice I have as a car owner is I don't do any maintenance. I just drive it to the ground, and I go back and buy another car. So intuitively, I think you can see from that example that what is the the cost-benefit ratio is maintain what you have, and hopefully it'll last you 200,000 or 300,000 miles. So when we put all these things together, then the question we got asked was, okay, Margot, and not me necessarily, but our team at NCE, what will it cost to try and improve everything from the average of 53 now to an average of 70, 71. And we pick 70 to 71 is because that's the threshold for when you get into good condition. All these lines represent different agencies. The top line is Elk Grove, and we said, well, Elk Grove's already at 77. We're going to keep them at 77 because they're not going to let it deteriorate to 70. But everyone else who's not at 70, we would bring them up to 70 over 10 years, and then keep it at that for the, over 20 years, and then keep it over the last 10. And what this would cost is about $344 million a year. So keep that number in your head because we're going to take that number and compare it with the other scenarios. The next scenario we said was, well, $344 million is an awful lot of money. How about we have a little bit more modest goal? And the next goal is, let's try to keep things where they are. Everyone stays exactly where they are. We don't do significant improvements, but we don't deteriorate over the next 30 years. And you can see that it's going to cost about $229 million. So yeah, we get a lot less. But is this what we have? So the third scenario now is, this is the reality of what we have. We currently have about $79, $80 million a year to spend. And no surprise, everything shows a downward trend, right? Because there's inflation built in here, and construction costs are going to go up, labor costs are going to go up. Over time, it's just going to cost more and more. And so the impact of this is that the average will be about 21 in 30 years. If we don't do anything, if we don't make any changes. Even Elk Grove, which started at 77, you can see it's going to drop to 43 in 30 years. So this is kind of the sobering part of the presentation. The next two parts, we ran two more scenarios. We said, well, what if? What if we try to add more funding? And this one was, well, what if we got a new sales tax measure and we were able to allocate a portion of that? And in your report, you have the details for what the assumptions are. But generally speaking, there is some improvement over existing funding, but it's still going to show a little bit of a downward trend, and that's an unfortunate outcome. The last one we tried to look at was, another source. What if we were able to get some general funds? And in this scenario, I think there were 4 agencies that said they might be able to get some, and if that were the situation, what would it result in? And you can see they all show positive impacts, but overall the trend is still a little downward. So I think the key is we're going to need a fair chunk of money, and I hate to have my presentation follow, what the LAO just told you, which is that money is shrinking. So we wanted to look at other ways. So let's look at some cost-saving techniques first of all. So the first and number one philosophy I have and advice I give everyone is, everyone has good roads. Even the county has, a third of your network has good roads. Make sure those good roads stay good. Don't ignore them and put some money aside and preserve them. Okay, that's number one. Look at cost-effective techniques. And there are many. One is recycling. Recycling is not just reduces greenhouse gas emissions, which is, fulfills the state's, some of the state's climate goals, but you're using what's already in the road to rebuild the road, and so it's going to cost a little bit less, usually on average 20 to 30% less over conventional treatment. So we would definitely recommend that. I think there are other ways. I think some of the cities, and I have a case study to share with you, to look at maybe try and get some simpler paving techniques out there. Another very common one is advertise in the spring. Don't wait till July to advertise because everyone's going to be competing, and everyone meaning other cities and the counties, and you're going to get high bids. So get your design done, wrapped it up by Christmas, put it out to bid in February, and then you might get some low bids. And that's a strategy we've advised many agencies to do. And then finally, I think there are many small cities. You don't have the economies of scale. Find a partner. The county's a good one. Mendocino County is a good example. If you guys have been to Fort Bragg or Point Arena, those are very tiny communities, but they all partner with the county to get the economies of scale in their paving program. So that would be another suggestion that we would have. Finally, 2 other things is, in order to make good decisions, again, because all of you are the policymakers here, you need good, accurate data. We would highly recommend that you got to keep the condition information in all these databases current, update them regularly so that you can come back and revisit this in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, and continue to tweak and adjust as needed. And then finally, of course, you knew I was going to say this, you got to look for a way of additional revenues. There's really no way around it. How we get there, there's a variety of mechanisms. I'm happy to share with you some. I know Kevin has already discussed with us quite a lot of those, but new sales tax measure probably is top of the list. And then finally, but by no means least, oops, did we take out Elk Grove? Oh, right there. Okay, do you want to? Get rid of it. Okay, hang on.
Payback
I went too,
goes
oops. I went too far, sorry.
Can we get this back up? Sorry. Yeah, I think what we're going to talk about is, this is a regional analysis, right? So we take, we looked at the regional cost everyone's using, and then we apply those on each agency's network. So it's not exactly what your cities and counties are separately providing to you, but it's pretty close. There's kind of one exception. So there we go. So on the additional funding, just to put it in perspective, so improving the PCI to 70. The additional funding we would need is $264.7 million. So what that would translate to is a new countywide sales tax percentage at 0.76%, dedicated solely to pavement. And then there's just maintaining would be 0.43%, dedicated solely to pavement. Now we've been looking at 0.5%, so that's actually getting somewhere close to that. But this is without any of those recommendations that we talked about. We think we can get some value out of those recommendations, so we would probably ask that we explore some of these recommendations. And so to try to actually get this on a somewhat good note here, we're going to go to this next slide, which talks about some of the recommendations that Elk Grove is already doing, and if looking at how we did our regional analysis versus how they do their analysis, you get different results because they're getting very low bids on some of their projects. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, so for instance, here in Elk Grove, the top line shows, this is what they really are doing. They're incorporating many of the recommendations we've talked about. And the biggest one is really a very aggressive preventive maintenance program to preserve those good roads. They don't ignore them. They kind of get on top of them regularly. Now, the bottom line is actually what we see in our regional analysis if we were using the same assumptions that all the other agencies are. So it's quite a significant difference right there. I think it's something to keep in mind that you can improve things without necessarily just putting more money, but some of the things that we talk about in the report, I think are well worth looking at.
Great. Thank you very much. And I think we've got some questions from 4 board members here. But before we do that, I'm going to ask the board if we can take the public comment on this item first, and we'll bring it back to the board. Thank you very much. And we've got some members of the public signed up to speak. I've got 3 members. And if there are other people wishing to speak, please bring your speaking request form to the clerk. We'll stop here with Mr. Dan Ellison, and then followed by Deborah Banks and Jeremiah Rohr.
Good afternoon. Many of you know me as an active transportation and transit advocate. But what I also know is that every single person in this county wants to fix my pothole, fix it first, state of good repair. Everybody wants that, including active transportation and transit people. Under no reasonable funding scenario presented today is our pavement index not going to decline. It will decline. There's no possible way that taxpayers or the state or the federal or anybody is going to come up with enough money to prevent that decline. So it's important that the authority and the member agencies, probably even more important, shift funding from making new infrastructure to maintaining existing infrastructure. SB 1 was never meant to solve the problem at the local level. It was largely to solve Caltrans problems, not the local problems. There's never going to be enough money coming from the state. The $8.3 billion has been spoken of as an asset. It's not an asset, it's a liability. It's something that you have to maintain, and you need the money to maintain it. So I would suggest that every project that comes before the authority be looked at with the lens, is this project going to generate enough economic activity to pay for its maintenance? And if the answer is no, that project shouldn't happen. Doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. And it's not just the authority that needs to shift their view, it's all of the other transportation agencies as well. If the authority is going to ask the county for a sales tax measure to help with this problem, I think it's important that the authority be able to demonstrate that it's already working on this issue, not we'll work on this issue if you give us more money, but we're already working on it. And that's the only way that the support will come for passing a sales tax measure. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Allison. Okay, we have Ms. Deborah Banks and Mr. Jeremiah Rohr. Ms. Deborah Banks.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Thanks for having us here, and happy June. I hope you guys had a great May. May is Bike Month. It's over. Yeah. You know, looking through these slides really quickly, it's really important for you to understand what it's like to be a cyclist on our roads. When we're in our cars, which I drove today, when we're in our cars, we've got 3,000 pounds around us, and there's a great suspension that can go over this poor pavement, these cracks, this kind of puzzle bark that creates our streets, that, as our presenter said, those cracks go all the way down to the infrastructure of the street. Cyclists end up having to avoid and swerve in order to miss that stuff because we don't have the same kind of suspension. And that often means that we are leaving a bike lane or a protected bike lane and end up swerving into the street where now we are now competing with our 3,000-pound vehicles. Not good. So we want our streets to be safe for all users. We want them to be able to be driven on, ridden on, skated on, scooted on, walked on, hoverboarded on, all of the various modes. And so we really urge you to prioritize the fix it first and making our pavement, bringing it from a barely fair up to a good level in whatever capacity we need to. One other piece about that is, you know, we spent a lot of time talking about serving our underserved communities, and in this instance, it feels like Sac County has been underserved. They have some of the worst streets, and they have a lot of streets that need a lot of repair. So a big shout out to supporting Sacramento, our city, and Sac County to get some of this fix-it-first work done first. Thank you.
Harumph.
Thank you, Deborah. Appreciate that. And thank you to the Sacramento Area Bike Association for a great May's Bike Month this year. Mr. Jeremiah Rohr.
Hello, my name is Jeremiah Rohr. I'm an avid cyclist for 60 years or so. One of the biggest health hazards I have in my life right now is riding my bicycle on the streets. I'm a 70-year-old man with lots of health conditions. My doctor has regular statements to me that we all know. But the biggest threat to my life every day is riding my bicycle on the streets of our city. As Deborah was talking about earlier, bicycles have small wheels, skateboards have small wheels, scooters have small wheels. These cracks and that kind of stuff are very dangerous for those kind of instruments in riding. We all talk about climate change. It's important. We're trying to encourage people to ride bikes, to do other forms of transportation because cars destroy our streets, and EVs are the worst of that because of their weight. So we want to get people into alternative transportations because it costs us less money to maintain the roads when they're used by cyclists. Cyclists don't beat up the roads. Scooters don't beat up the roads. Skateboards don't beat up the roads. So anytime you can narrow the street down and give the bicycles more lane, which we all need because we're not liked on the streets and we're not liked on the sidewalks, give us space. And that reduces your cost of maintaining the road because you have less road being beaten up by the automobile. Anyway, just please think about the users that are using your road, and we're trying to get more and more people on bikes and scooters and things like that to help us all for a variety of reasons. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremiah. Appreciate that. That is the number of speakers on this item. Madam Clerk, do we have any other speakers?
I do not have any more speaker slips.
Okay, let me bring this back to the board. I have Board Member Desmond, Talemantes, and Valenzuela, and Mr. Hume, were you punched up? Yeah. And so I saw you punched up after Ms. Talemantes, so we'll bring you up in between there. Mr. Desmond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll start. This explains why Elk Grove is so smug with their 80 PCI roads. But I think this presentation illustrates a few things. Number one, it explains why, if you're the county supervisor that represents the most unincorporated roadways, why you are the least popular public official sitting on this dais here today. And the other thing I think it illustrates is the importance of participating in this funding round work group at SACOG. Been participating in that funding round as the elected from the SACOG board members' perspectives, and I see a lot of our public works and our own county DOT folks out here, and you as well, Kevin, participating in this. Sacramento County, we have set aside about $60 million in unrestricted general fund dollars in the last 3 years, plus an additional, I think, $22 million in ARPA dollars. So a total of $82 million to help supplement the SB1 funding that comes to the county. We have about a $1 billion maintenance backlog, and we need, I think, about $60 million just to keep pace with that. So I think it's extremely important for not only folks who sit on SACOG, several of whom are on this dais here, but we are all represented on SACOG, and I think it's really important to make it clear what our needs are in terms of controlling some of the money, making sure it stays in Sacramento County, and making sure that we can prioritize consistent with what the needs are in our respective jurisdictions, because that has been a frustration, and that's what part of the work group is meant to address. I have a question actually for the presenter, a couple questions. Number one, you mentioned if we do nothing and it stays the same, if we just continue spending the same amount of money, I want to make sure I know what we're talking about. It looks like you're primarily talking about SB1 dollars and Measure A dollars coming to each of the jurisdictions. Is that correct?
There's multiple sources of dollars in there. It's not just SB1 or the
I said
Measure A.
primarily SB1 and Measure A dollars. Yes, I see other, but you did not consider the additional general fund dollars, for instance, that Sacramento County puts in. That was not part of your assumption, I don't think. I didn't see it in the existing. Correct.
We intentionally excluded general fund dollars from the existing budget scenario, and that fourth one does include if we
a general fund contribution.
Yes,
right.
Only moving forward. Yes.
Okay, I just want to clarify that.
Yes.
And then number two, one of the speakers alluded to this, and I appreciate Deb. I appreciate you being here, the bike advocates being here, and it strikes me as that we have a tension oftentimes in transportation funding because there is a priority to having more pedestrian and bike facilities, which I completely support, but as you all know, that's a lot more expensive to add that additional capacity, especially in some of these unincorporated areas, which would require a lot of money to acquire rights-of-way. So if we can't add those, at the very least, we need to make sure those roads are well-maintained and safe for bicyclists, pedestrians, and drivers alike. But I just wanted to also, I wonder if any of your calculations made any assumptions in terms of electric vehicles and the additional weight of electric vehicles, because isn't that having a larger impact on the degradation of our roadways? Can you speak to that?
In general, passenger vehicles are not going to have a huge impact. So let me answer your question in two parts. First is the assumption was that no, we did not include the impact of electric vehicles in the deterioration models that we used.
Okay.
But for electric passenger vehicles, it's actually minimal impact.
Okay.
However, when it moves to trucks and buses, that does have an impact.
Okay, well, thank you. I appreciate that because because I've heard that, and I didn't know on the passenger side it really doesn't make much of a difference. So that's helpful. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Supervisor Desmond. Let me bring this over to Board Member Talemantes.
And I also have a question for the presenter. You wanted to stay up there. I have a question for slide 10. I know it's a bar graph right now of the counties and our conditions of our roads. Is there any way that bar graph can be converted into a area map or like heat map to show where in the city of Sacramento the roads are at what number and
Yes.
where in Elk Grove? Okay, yeah, just
In
because.
fact, most of these agencies already have those maps.
Yeah, if we could include it as part of this report, so I
Include it
have
in
it
the
all in
report?
one place, that'd be wonderful. Just because I know, for me, I represent North Natomas, South Natomas. North Natomas is all new development, so our index on our roads there is probably about 70, compared to South Natomas, where my index for my personal street is about 30. And so when you accumulate the average for the city of Sacramento, North Natomas is definitely increasing our number. Our number's probably a lot lower than what it says. But I'd love to just see the map so that I can have it all in one place, because this is really informational and interesting. So thank you.
The county maps are quite difficult because it's such a broad area. It has to be broken into chunks. The cities, I know city of Sacramento has those maps by council districts in their report.
Okay.
But the answer is yes, except for maybe the county, because it's hard to show it all in one place.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Board Member Telemantes. Let me pass over to Mr. Hume, and then I'll come back on the queue here. Board Member Hume.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to point out for Supervisor Desmond's purposes that obviously Elk Grove's condition is due to its current and former leadership.
Learn from our mistakes, Elk Grove.
And speaking of smugness, I would just like to say that Mayor Singh Allen obviously read this staff report and wore the green dress just to rub the rest of our noses in it.
Oh, yeah.
About seeing green on all those tables.
Dang, maybe
Thank
that's
you,
why
Mr.
I wore
Hume.
the yellow and blue.
Yeah,
Well, Supervisor Frost is the realist in the group with the
with the red.
red.
Okay, there we go. So let me bring this over to Board Member Valenzuela.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a sobering conversation we've had in the city of Sacramento, where I believe so far this year, we've had more people die on our streets in cars, walking, and on bikes than have been murdered in our community. It's when we think about the public safety aspect of this, a huge proponent of Fix It First, because yes, sometimes you can't get the sidewalk or the bike lanes improved, but where you can, like what we're doing on Broadway right now between my district and Councilmember Jennings' district, it does so much, not just to improve the ride on the road, but to actually create that space and those safety improvements. Even things like lines, like we all drive all over the county because we go to these JPAs, and there's been so many streets where I'm like, which lane am I in right now? Like this can't be safe. And then when you think about these sobering numbers, it really speaks to the level of investment we put into these facilities and how disproportionate that is to what we're seeing in the community when it comes to a public safety perspective. So I have to say that, and also to say, because Highway 50 goes through my district as well, and that project just never ends. I think when I took office, they're like, it's going to be done in December 2021, and that is not happening. And every month when I drive by and watch those crews working, great jobs, really glad they have access to those amazing jobs, but I just see dollars. Like I just see dollars just flowing through this project, just hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars that we spent on this freeway project that's going to add a lane. And I appreciate that, like, the people disagree about freeways, and that's fine. But I think when you think about return on investment, not just from state and federal and regional grants that we can pull down when we invest these dollars, but on what it means for a community where people are literally dying in our streets for things that are largely preventable, not all preventable. You get DUIs, you get people who are being just stupid on the road. But for the most part, the accidents that happened in my district where people have been killed, it was an infrastructure problem. It was the bike lane ended, they had a block to go, they didn't have any place to be, that car didn't see them and just runs into them. And so I just wanted to ground us in that, because I think it is a really timely conversation about Fix It First. I don't hear from my community that, hey, I really want this new thing to be built. I hear like what's happening with this, and there are surprising areas of disparity, like in East Sacramento, like their roads are actually pretty old because it's a pretty old community, and like when you walk on those streets, like you can see the differences in the pavement quality and the texture, and they're like, when are we ever going to get this road repaved? We've got a school down the street, right? So I just want to ground us in that public safety perspective and thank the bike advocates as well as Dan Allison always for coming to remind us about these priorities while we're looking at a potential sales tax measure, because I know that's something that a lot of people that you work with prioritize, and the climate community's engagement in this is really important. It's not just about emissions, it's literally about saving lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Valenzuela. Let me bring this over to Board Member Frost.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to thank you for the presentation. It is sobering and one that we have had a conversation around for years at the county and in my cities. And one of the things I always, when I look back in time, it seems like the prioritization of, we need to get more money so we can fix the roads. And every time someone comes up with an idea for a tax measure, we're out there trying to gain support from all the different, groups. And when we, at the end of the day, come up with a tax measure, we come up with something sort of like a Christmas tree. It's been referred to by my people, the realists in the group, like a Christmas tree. We started out with we wanted money for fixing roads, and we ended up with a menagerie of all these different things that we can do, and if we can just get everyone on board, and then by the time the tax measure is introduced, you then have, I guess the Sacramento Taxpayers Association or the people who, that side of the conversation that just doesn't want to vote for another tax measure that's going to equal not really what we thought we were going to get. And this is not a conversation of criticism. It's more of a, what do you have to do to gain the trust of the people? And is it really possible to come up with a tax measure or an idea of, we're specifically going to allocate money to fix roads? And that's what this is going to do, and it'll do this much in each of the cities and in the county and each of the areas of the county. And it'll sunset when it gets this thing accomplished. And then afterwards, you look back and you actually did it, and you show that you did it, and people are like, wow, that worked. Now I believe that something can actually fix my roads. I have people in my district who have lived on their street for 40 years, and it's never been fixed, and it's literally gone back to the dirt. I'm talking about Rio Linda. And I have other areas of my district, like Folsom is a newer city, but Citrus Heights isn't. My road on my street has been repaired, but it was 28 PCI before it got repaired. So we lived for a long time with that road. I also wanted to make a comment relating to, because I love it's like everyone's trying to figure out, I love your summary of different ways to get money. But, when you think about it, our development community, we can look at incorporating some of this stuff into passing it off to developers, but they're already having trouble penciling their projects, and it's driving the cost of housing up. And there are a lot of projects in the county that have wanted to move forward sooner, but they're trying to figure out how to do the major infrastructure required to just make that happen. And when you talk about raising impact fees or vehicle fees, these are things, those are taxes. They're just that people don't maybe think of them as taxes, but it's raising the cost. And so I wish there was a way that we could actually keep it simple and come up with, I bet you could get, if you did it right and you worked with the Sacramento Taxpayers Association, you could actually get a tax that they would support and that the people would support. I bet there's ways to get something done if you focus on just fixing the roads, because the money, and finally I'm going to say, the color of money right now is not to fix the roads. The money doesn't want to fix the roads. It wants to create something wonderful. I mean, complete streets is wonderful, but we still have roads that we need to fix. And so I think the sentiment that I wanted to leave today is, if I think we need to figure out how to, the county has done it. Supervisor Desmond talked about how we've actually allocated millions of dollars just for fixing roads because we realized if we didn't each year, the annual cost of just keeping our existing PCI is going up, and it's gone up very rapidly. I think it's $1.2 billion in deferred maintenance on the unincorporated county roads right now. So those are just some thoughts. I know it's hard because everyone wants a piece of every tax initiative. And you have the balance of those who are pro-tax or no tax, but there are taxes that are good, that actually accomplish something good, and if people perceive they're going to get what they thought they were going to get and it can't be changed in 5 years to something else, they might actually support it. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Board Member Frost. Let me go back to Board Member Daniels, and then I got Board Member Singh Allen, and then we're going to go back through the queue over here.
Thank you. And not to pile on, but I want to express my appreciation to Supervisor Desmond, because when people complained to me in Citrus Heights about the roads, I said, well, you could live in Desmond's area. So, no. With love. I want to publicly express my appreciation for Dan Ellison, who comes and speaks, and he speaks in other meetings. I don't always agree, but I greatly appreciate the fact that he cares, and he takes the time to show up and tell us about something, because I think he's a very thoughtful person, and I hope people listen to him. I want to say that there is no greater example, in my opinion, of government dysfunction than roads. There is tons of money in government, tons and tons and tons. Some of us sit on the Regional Transit Board. There's hundreds of millions of dollars that get spent on empty buses and empty light rail cars and stuff like that, while at the same time the county is spending $60 million or whatever on all of its roads. Absolutely ludicrous. There are these projects that come up to us. Citrus Heights is getting $1.2 million for a trail or something like that. I bet if we did an advisory vote, 90% of the people would go like, no, spend the money to fill the potholes in my city instead of a trail. So it isn't that there isn't enough money. It's just that local, state, and federal decision makers don't know how to spend money right. Roads are meant to move vehicles from point A to point B. And at some point we came along and said, hey, let's put bikes out in the roads. And then guess what happened? People got hit by cars. I'm just shocked. I don't understand why we moved bikes off of sidewalks. Very few people walk in the world anymore these days. You have beautiful areas all around Sacramento that have very wide sidewalks. I don't understand why we do this. And we keep continuing to want to put that issue into the roadway. It just doesn't make sense to me. So I think Supervisor Frost is a little too optimistic maybe about a tax increase. I love that you did address some cost savings type of approach. I think it needs to be a really part of the main focus, because I don't believe you're going to get a majority of people to increase taxes, because other ones are coming too. I'm on other boards, and other tax increase ideas are coming. And when you see another one and another one and another one, people are just overwhelmed. They're making decisions on, do they eat today? Seniors are the people who vote mostly in this country of any one block, and they're on fixed incomes, and they're trying to decide if they can eat. And you want to think you're going to put a sales tax increase in front of them, and they're going to say yes? No way is it going to happen. And so we all need to look at ways of refocusing money, is the way I'll put it, and put it into priorities of roads, because our society depends on getting from point A to point B. This whole board, I would say the majority of us probably drove here today just to be on this board. And so we didn't ride a skateboard, we didn't ride a bike, we drove here. And so we've lost that focus of really what roads are intended to do and why we need to keep them maintained. And asking people for more money is not going to, I think, be a realistic approach to what we need to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Board Member Daniels. Board Member Singh Allen.
Thank you. So much to digest here from the comments, but I think I'll initially just respond to Board Member Daniels. I respectfully disagree that there are, respectfully, there are some taxes that are good to Supervisor Frost's comment. In our city, we did pass Measure E, and we're bringing in an additional $30 million. And one of the biggest reasons is that we focused on keeping politics out of it and focused on quality of life. And as we explore funding opportunities, I think that is a key discussion. That's one of the main reasons why the previous attempts failed, is it just got so political. And the priorities were all over the place, and somewhere lost along the way was the quality of life and the constituents and the residents that we all represent. But, a humble brag, obviously, as the mayor of Elk Grove, it pleases me to see those numbers, but I also recognize the hard work from previous city councils and current councils and the hardworking members of our Public Works Department. This is a priority of the council, and it has been. So we pay close attention. When we get those calls, we are very proactive. And some of the funding for Measure E is for opportunities like this to make sure that we are ahead of it so that we don't get into a situation where those numbers go down. So, but again, this is, I feel for everyone, I understand. But at the same time, I think that there are many opportunities, but it's going to require that regional approach, regional lens. And I know that our council, we work very hard for the city of Elk Grove, but we also sit on various boards and commissions and have that keen eye on being regionalists as well, because quality of life doesn't begin and end in zip codes. And Supervisor Desmond, I think you're just probably, sorry, Pat, my favorite supervisor.
Heard it publicly.
Wow. Et tu, Brute.
He needed a friend after all has been going on.
Right now, he needed some extra love.
Well, you know who's punched up to speak next is Board Member Desmond.
Just really quick. Director Talamantes made me think about this, and looking through the lens of equity, that informs so many things that we do. And I think it was Deb who mentioned it, and I meant to bring this up, but you made me think about it. Is it possible to break these down by environmental justice communities in Sacramento? Because the reality is the poorest people in our county, in our region, are the ones with the worst roads. And I think we really need to shine a bright light on that. So I don't know if that's possible to do when you maybe take care of some of the requests from Director Talamantes. I'd like to see if we could also do that as well. So thank you.
Absolutely, we can do that. We have done that for the city of Oakland.
Okay, very good. And then let me bring this over. I see Board Member Frost is punched up to speak, and Board Member Kennedy is left for the day here.
Just quickly, I wanted to go on record as saying you'll probably never know me as a person who's promoting a tax initiative or a tax increase. I think I wanted to what I was trying to say was, I don't think there's any such thing as no good tax. There could be, a tax that I could support and that people would support. But legalese always gets into it. There's always something written into that measure that allows for flexibility or change down the road or a number of things. It doesn't always get it done what the people thought was going to get done. They think they're getting something when they're voting, and they're not. So I think being transparent about what they're getting and then delivering what we said that tax was going to deliver would go a long way to building trust in local government, that our local government does what they said they're going to do. And I think a good example of that is Rancho Cordova. They passed a tax, and they've done an amazing job promoting community and economic development in Rancho Cordova. Their people trusted them, and they lived up to that trust. And not every city can accomplish that. So kudos to them, too. And that's it. That's it.
Well,
Thanks.
thank you, Board Member Frost. And I think what I heard you say is that an appropriate tax, and that's the conclusion of our pontification of the board here on a non-voting item. But it is to provide direction to our staff to explore other best management practices and to learn how the cities and counties can reduce their costs, and also to look at advocating for state and federal funding, and also how maybe there could be city or county pavement maintenance approaches where it can, through the economy of scale, reduce those issues. And then finally, looking here at other project reduction cost measures for the current maintenance here. And we'll leave the bigger debating for either anybody who wants to have a beer at Sac City Brews in my district, and could always do that. But before I conclude, let me bring this over. I see Board Member Rosario punched up to speak here.
It's a question that I have. When you look at the entire county, you have many cities that have a PCI that is acceptable, where you have parts of the county that are not. So is it possible, I don't know if this is to do to tax the cities that have greater needs and maybe look at even the equity of the condition of the roads for those cities, but just to do it for specific cities, not all, because you're right, somebody mentioned, and somebody who's an elderly living, in a nice elderly home in the city of Folsom may say, no, I don't, this is not where I want to spend my money. However, there may be other cities that have greater needs that they know we need to invest in our roads. Is that a possibility?
Wow, that's a great question. I'm only an engineer. that might be above my pay grade.
I can answer that real quick. Yeah, so I think an example of that might be SAC-RT got the ability to do a tax in a sub area of the county, right, through some legislative bill. So we could do something very similar if we had that if we wanted to specifically focus on Fix It First, and that really only applied to some of the jurisdictions, we could try to do that. Yeah, it's possible. It would require legislation.
Mm-hmm. It would require the legislature, huh? Well, that's an easy one to do. But but thank you, Mr. Busey. Again, here the action for today is to provide direction here, and I don't unless there's any objection for what's identified here. All of this direction, I think, is something that we've all been working well as counties and cities to look at just the cost and maintenance and efforts to better collaborate here, and also looking for other state and federal funding. I will say that this issue is very personal, and I'll disagree with my good board member here. We've done a lot of great work on air quality together, in the sense that number one, where we do agree is that we need to make sure that our roads are healthy and safe and functional, because many times they're not functional. And I had the unfortunate need to do a press event, or not press event, but answer to the media about, in the last 12 hours, we had 3 fatalities of cyclists. And I cycle to downtown. My commute's about 5.5 miles one way, so it's 11 miles total, to drop off my son at his kindergarten, and then my 2-year-old at the childcare. And so I've got to cross many arterial streets. I don't do it every day, but 1 day a week reduces our impact to the roads by 20%. It reduces our emissions by 20%. And my hope is it also reduces my wasteland by 20%. But the goal here really is that there are other folks, and many folks, and particularly in these disadvantaged communities, who don't have the option of a vehicle. And in fact, we were walking Stockton Boulevard today. Stockton Boulevard was actually the corridor where we had trains, where we had cyclists, where we had actually the photos of the horses with the carriages through that whole area, and it was built out as a multimodal connecting network. And that's what our streets should be about. It's about conveyance. not about just vehicles and cars. Yes, that has become our predominant nature, but that doesn't mean that that's our future. And if our future is to only build out wider and wider roads and make 3-lane and 4-lane avenues in neighborhoods, then I think to Mr. Dan Allison's point, we're adding a liability to our all of our city's costs. And Board Member Desmond and I share Howe Avenue here. And when I first came on to the council in 2015, within a week, we had 3 cyclist fatalities on Howe Avenue who were trying to get to college, trying to get to Sac State. And that's a 3 in that area where all the apartments are. College kids, I think their biggest expense is a car. You shouldn't have a car, in my opinion, when you're going to college. You should save your money, focus on that. But the needs are what they are. Instead, they cycled. And that's an area where we have essentially 6 lanes inside of our interior area. So we've designed, unfortunately, a system of conveyance of people, of transportation, that has led us to require us to build essentially, bigger and bigger and heavier vehicles. And now, even with the advent of electric vehicles, another impact. So I do believe, and this is my opinion as one board member here, that we have to make sure that we're financing our roads so that we don't have to rip them out completely in our area. And in that point, when we have to go make improvements, we should be thinking about what's the best for the future of that roadway and spending that opportunity to make sure that it is safe, it is slower, and that anybody, whether they're a senior, like Mr. Rohr, who says, hey, I'm a 70-year-old person, if I hit a pothole, it's dangerous. To the student that we want them to go ride their bike to middle school or to high school and not be dependent on every parent having to drive their kid to high school because they can't ride their bike to high school. Now think about the public health issue that we're facing. We're spending millions of dollars now on public health for our young kids because when we grew up, we probably walked or rode our bikes to school, but they don't. We have our parents in the SUVs, and you see the train of SUVs going to every single high school every morning. And as soon as those parents drop off their kid, then all of a sudden, sometimes they forget that that there are other kids there. And so, in fact, we're having to spend time and money and energy on training parents about how to drive once they leave their school. So redesigning and engineering our roads to a safe way, I think, is a critical piece. So safety is the conversation here. And then also fiscal prudence is the conversation here. And I'll encourage everyone to, if you haven't tried out the new electric bikes, I do think that the e-bike change is going to change how many folks actually use electric bikes. I see more and more seniors now using electric bikes, but the issue really is it safe for them to do so because of the conditions of our roads? So with that, I'll leave it there since this is not an action item, but provide direction unless there's contrary.
Your agenda shows it as an action item.
Oh, is it an action item here to provide direction? Okay, it's an action item to
It just
provide
says direction.
Well, I mean,
Is that
I think I got direction, though.
the direction? You got direction?
there's nothing in the list that is
Specific.
final. I'll put it that way.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Well, you heard no objection to the direction, so we're going to leave it at that. Is that okay, Mr. Brick?
Okay.
Perfect. Good. Very good. And I think it's a good conversation to have, and this information is important because we need to educate the public and the PAC, which many folks don't know, which is the working group of all our public directors. I think why Measure B got to 65%, Mr. Hume, is that correct? Like 65, was because our public works departments were also engaged in doing individual outreach, making sure that we're working with our public works department countywide. I think is going to help us whenever we decide to go through the appropriate measure to help us find that local solution. So we'll stop there and we'll move on to our next and final item here. It is 3:05 p.m. So, Madam Clerk, next item.
Item number 13 is to receive a presentation on the 2024 Sacramento County Transportation Mitigation Fee Program Nexus Study and approve a resolution adopting the 2024 Nexus study, revising the overall program allocation to align with the 2024 Nexus study, setting the updated fee rates effective January 1, 2025, and amending the local arterial program to include smart growth arterials and corridors.
Chair, before we start this item will require at least 11 members to vote on it, and probably will take about 25 minutes unless we want to waive the presentation, but I think we're right at
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Busey. We're going to waive the presentation. This is an item, a standard procedure we have to do for any nexus. I think we do all at our cities. So without objection, we're waiving the presentation.
Okay.
Very good. I'll ask, Madam Clerk, do we have members of the public signed up to speak?
We do not.
We do not. Is there an action from the board? Board Member Talamantes. It's been moved by Board Member Talamantes. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been seconded by Board Member Singh-Allen. Any comments or questions from the board? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Measure passes. Thank you very much. Okay, that concludes the business of the day. Any questions or comments from the board members? Seeing none, we are adjourned at 3:07 p.m.